Front 242 is a Belgian electronic music group that came into prominence during the 1980s. Pioneering the style they called electronic body music, they were a profound influence on the electronic and industrial music genres. History Formation Front 242 were formed in 1981 in Aarschot, near Leuven, Belgium, by Daniel Bressanati and Dirk Bergen, who wanted to create music and graphic design using emerging electronic tools. The first single, Principles, was released in 1981. The front part of the name comes from the idea of an organized popular uprising. Patrick Codenis and Jean-Luc Demeyer had separately formed a group called Underviewer at around the same time, and the two duos joined together in 1982. Bressanati, Codenis and Demeyer took turns on vocals at first, until they settled on Demeyer as the lead vocalist. Demeyer came to write most of the lyrics and Valerie Jane Steele also wrote several tracks including Don't Crash. They decided not to use the regular waveform settings on their synthesizers, arguing that creating the waveform for each note was part of the creative process. Their next single, You Men, was released in 1982, followed by the band's first album Geography that same year. In 1983, Dirk Bergen left the band to pursue graphic design, and Richard Jonquière, referred to as Richard 23, joined as vocalist. Rising popularity Front 242 became a popular musical group in Belgium. Their next album, No Comment, released in 1984, was the first to introduce the term electronic body music in association with their sound. Front 242 signed with a Wax Trax label in 1984, and started their first tour in the United States with Ministry. This tour led to the creation of Revolting Cocks by Richard 23, Luc Van Acker, Alan Jurgensen of Ministry and others. In 1987, Front 242 signed with Wax Trax Records in the US and Red Rhino in Europe, and released back catalog and official version. In 1988, Front by Front was released, and in December of that same year, Headhunter, became the band's first club hit, reaching number 13 on the US Billboard Dance Club Play Songs chart. 1990s Tyranny, released in 1991, became the band's highest charting album, reaching number 95 on the Billboard 200. Tyranny was the first album they released under contract with a major corporate label, Sony Epic, after the widespread popularity of Front by Front. Sony Epic also acquired the rights to the band's back catalog from Wax Trax, and issued re-released versions of the albums with new cover art and bonus tracks taken from singles and EPs. A broader public was exposed to Front 242's music in 1992 in the film Single White Female, starring Bridget Fonda and Jennifer Jason Leigh. In the film, obsessed roommate Lee ties Fonda to a chair but leaves her with a television remote control. In order to attract attention, Fonda tunes into a music video channel and turns up the volume. The video playing at the time is Front 242's Rhythm of Time, from the album Tyranny. Also in 1992, the television commercials for the film K2 were set to the Front 242 song Moldavia, from the same album. In 1992, Bressanati returned to combining graphic arts with music, taking his lithographs on tour to 3 U.S. galleries. Bressanati also composed a solo half-hour atmospheric recording called Art and Strategy to play during viewings of the lithographs, and released it in a limited edition of 1,000 CDs. Front 242's style shifted abruptly with each of their next two albums, released in rapid succession in 1993 on Epic's sub-label RE, 06210311 UP Evil and 522 and 9 Seconds 12 Off. The band describes the two albums as based on the duality of good and evil. However, strains were emerging, with the band members apparently having different artistic views. Despite these tensions, they performed on the main stage of the 1993 Lollapalooza tour. Neither of these albums had significant input from Richard 23, and 522 and 9 Seconds 12 Off only included their lead vocalist, Jean-Luc Demeyer, on a remixed track originally from Up Evil. On the other hand, A variety of new contributors were listed as members of Front 242 on these albums: Jean-Marc Pauli and Pierre Pauli on Upheaval, and 99 Kowalski and Aaron Westwood on Off. 99 Kowalski is the stage name of Kristen Kowalski, making a tradition out of Richard 23's idea of number as name. Kowalski and Westwood were originally members of a New York City band called Spill who Nutty and Codenis had brought to Belgium to produce their debut album. After the recording sessions fell apart, they contributed to Front 242 on the Off release. After the release of 6:21 and 3 seconds 11 Upheaval and 5:22 and 9 seconds 12 Off, there was no new material from Front 242 under any lineup. Instead, the band released a stream of live recordings and remixes. However, this period also saw a proliferation of side projects, an inordinate number of which involved De Meyer. Earlier, Richard 23 played in the Revolting Cocks, and De Meyer had a side project doing vocals for Bigger 20 for their single, The Bog in 1990. In 1995, De Meyer met Mark Heel of Cubanate at a Frontline Assembly concert, and the two of them collaborated along with Jed Denton and Jonathan Sharp, to record a cybertech project for the new Cybertech record label. After the departure of Sharp and the demise of the Cybertech label, the remaining group continued working under the name C-Tech. De Meyer also took over as vocalist for Birmingham 6 for their 1996 album Era of Judgment. 1996 also saw the debut album Elemental from Cobalt 60, which De Meyer formed with Dominique Laurent and Frédéric Sébastien of Reims, France, members of Cryogberite. This was the start of a number of releases from Cobalt 60, which also did the soundtrack for the video game Wing Commander V. Meanwhile, Richard 23 recorded with the group's Holy Gang, and later, Larchak. The four core members of Front 242 regrouped in 1998 to compose radically reworked versions of many of their songs, which they then performed on their first tour in 5 years, appropriately called the Re-Boot Tour. They acknowledged the influence of The Prodigy and their Fat of the Land album in crafting the new, more techno style of Re-Boot. The new tour material was the subject of Front 242's new recording contract in the US with Metropolis Records. Front 242 also indicated at this time that they were recording new material. However, they had little activity after 1998, making occasional appearances in Europe and Mexico, while Codenis recorded under the name Gaydon with Steve Stoll in 2001. 2000s 2002 saw the beginning of a wave of new material from Nutty and Codenis, and then from Front 242. In August 2002 a DVD CD 2-disc set called Speed Tribe was released by Dance.com. The DVD was a collaboration with experimental documentary filmmakers Rod Chong and Sharon Matarazzo, who filmed the 2001 24-hour Le Mans. In the video, the race cars, clouds, rain and spectators form an impressionistic visual backdrop for the music. Several months later, the first release from Male or Female, also known as Morph, a new project for Nutty and Codenis along with vocalist Elko Bligiat. In 2002 and 2003, Morph released an album, an EP, a double album, and a DVD CD 2-disc combo, on the Belgian record label Alpha Matrix, and went on tour through the US. Then, 2002 and 2003 also saw the release of the new material from Front 242 in a Decade, the EP Still and Raw and the album Pulse, released on Ibis Records in Europe and Metropolis in the US. These represented another iteration of Front 242's explicitly stated goal of reinventing itself. The style of the two new releases is more mellow than some of their past work, using more glitchy and bleepy sounds. As well, it uses the manipulated voice as a musical instrument. The new releases have a much more emotional style from De Meyer, which was presaged in his later recordings with C-Tech and particularly Cobalt 60 on its album 12. Front 242 promised a new US tour to perform new material from these releases. They have made occasional appearances in Latin America and Europe, even being rejoined by Dirk Bergen for a reunion concert in Aarschot in 2004 under the original lineup of Nutty, Bergen, Codenis and De Meyer. This performance was kept secret until 2 days before the show, but when the Scene magazine Sideline and the band's label Alpha Matrix launched the news, tickets were quickly sold out. The band has now also set itself to re-release its entire back catalogue both as a normal CD and as a limited edition consisting of a 2-CD set holding previously unreleased material. For this, the band is working together with the Belgian label Alpha Matrix that already took care of releasing the albums of the Front 242 side project Male or Female. The first re-release is their debut album Geography, this time newly remastered personally by Bruce Nutty to surprisingly powerful effect and including 3 extra tracks on the normal CD format. Meanwhile, their enthusiasm for side projects has continued, as Patrick Coden has started appearing with a new group called Red Sniper, Bruce Nutty started recording with a new group called Truasso, and Coden and Richard 23 formed a quasi-DJ project called Coda 23 which toured in late 2004 and early 2005 as the opening act for VNV Nation. De Meyer contributed vocals on 2 studio tracks for the Gliss album Nemesis in 2005. The lyrical content of the 2 songs were based on the poems of Charles Baudelaire. Front 242 toured through 20 venues in North America in November 2005, their first tour as a full band since 2000. The band performed at the Roskilde Festival in 2006. The band's sold-out 2-day performance at the Ancienne Belgique in Brussels has been recorded for a future release via Alpha Matrix. In December 2006, Front 242 announced from their MySpace page that they were writing music for a video game called Cypher Complex and provided a link to a teaser trailer with a short sample of one of their scores. In 2007, De Meyer announced a new project, 32 Crash via the Alpha Matrix label. The band is preparing for an album release in October 2007 after the release of the EP Humanity. In August 2008, Front 242 played live at the Infest Festival in Bradford, England. In October 2008, Front 242 performed for the first time in Finland, at the Alternative Party 2008 Media Arts Festival. Moments On June 1, 2008, the Alpha Matrix label announced that Front 242 would make an ultimate statement towards abusive audio compression by releasing the free 2-track download, First Moment. By June 15 the same year, the tracks were made available for free on Alpha Matrix's site in medium and high bitrate MP3s, WAV, FLAC, and M4A formats. Contrary to what fans and some media speculated, the 2-track download was not new studio material. Instead, First Moments consisted of 2 previously unreleased live tracks, You Men, and Im Rhythmus Bleiben, in rather stunning sound quality. It is rumored that over 20,000 people downloaded the tracks within hours of being made available. The label later confirmed that over 25,000 people downloaded the free tracks. On June 4, 2008, Alpha Matrix announced the release of Moments. The album was a live recording encompassing the best of Front 242's compositions. The album was shipped in several formats including limited CD box sets, vinyl in different colors including 300-copy limited editions, and as a 1-disc CD release. Band members: Jean-Luc De Meyer Euro vocals, Daniel Bressanati Euro keyboards, programming, live mixing, Patrick Coden Euro keyboards, programming, guitars, samplers, Richard Jonquier, often credited as Richard 23 Euro electronic percussion, vocals, Tim Croker Euro electronic drums. Occasional band members and collaborators Dirk Bergen Euro credited as keyboardist on Geography, Jean-Marc Pauli Euro credited for writing and composing vocals on 621 and 3 Seconds 11 Up Evil, Pierre Pauli Euro credited for writing and composing vocals on 621 and 3 Seconds 11 Up Evil, Kristin Kowalski Euro credited as writer, composer and vocalist on 522 and 9 Seconds 12 Off, Animal, and Angels vs. Animals, Aaron Westwood Euro credited as writer, composer and vocalist on 522 and 9 Seconds 12 Off, Animal, and Angels vs. Animals, John Dubs Euro credited as writer and composer on Animal and Angels vs. Animals, Jean-Marc Lederman a Euro credited as remixer on Angels vs Animals. Discography. Geography, no comment, back catalogue, official version, front by front, Tyranny, Live Target, 6:21 and 3 seconds 11 up Evil, 5:22 and 9 seconds 12 off, Angels vs Animals, Live Code, Mud at GE. Mix at GE, Reboot, Live 98, Pulse, Moments. Charts. Albums US Billboard 200. Singles. Side projects and guest appearances, 32 Crash a Euro Jean-Luc Demeyer, The Art Corporation a Euro Daniel Bressonutti, Art and Strategy a Euro Daniel Bressonutti, Patrick Codenis. Single track CD included with book Art and Strategy 92 Feet, Bigger 20 a Euro Jean-Luc Demeyer, On Track The Bog, Birmingham 6 a Euro Jean-Luc Demeyer, Cobalt 60 a Euro Jean-Luc Demeyer, Coda 23 a Euro Patrick Codenis, Richard 23, Cybertech Project C-Tech a Euro Jean-Luc Demeyer, Frontline Assembly a Euro Jean-Luc Demeyer a Euro guest vocals on track Future Fail, Artificial Soldier album, Gaydon a Euro Patrick Codenis, Gliss a Euro Jean-Luc Demeyer a Euro guest vocals on The Irreparable. And La Bar copyright Atres, Grisha Zem a Euro Daniel Bressonutti, Patrick Codenis, Holy Gang a Euro Richard 23, Implant a Euro Jean-Luc Demeyer, On Track The Creature, The Fucking Fox a Euro Patrick Codenis, Larchak a Euro Richard 23, Male or Female a Euro Daniel Bressonutti, Patrick Codenis, Ministry a Euro Richard 23, Background vocals on track The Nature of Love, Modern Cubism a Euro Jean-Luc Demeyer, Nothing But Noise a Euro Daniel Bressonutti, Dirk Bergen, Parade Ground a Euro Patrick Codenis on album Rosary, Prothese a Euro Daniel Bressonutti, Dirk Bergen, Punish Yourself a Euro Jean-Luc Demeyer, On Track Voodoo Virus, Red Sniper a Euro Patrick Codenis, Revolting Cox a Euro Richard 23, Speed Tribe a Euro Daniel Bressonutti, Patrick Codenis, Truasso a Euro Daniel Bressonutti, as remixer, Underviewer a Euro Patrick Codenis, Jean-Luc Demeyer. References. External links, official website, Hallelujah Euro an audio-visual co-production between Front 242 and Design is Dead.